Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the ship New Dawn and looked out at the stars. He had been traveling through space for 3 months now. His mission was simple: find new worlds where humans could live. The year was 2157, and Earth was getting crowded. Jake was not alone. Behind him, 50,000 humans slept in special pods. They were the best and brightest from Earth: scientists, doctors, engineers, and farmers. All of them had signed up for a one-way trip to the stars. They would never see Earth again. "Captain," called out his second officer, Lisa Crawford. She was a young woman with bright eyes and a quick mind. "We are getting close to the target system." Jake nodded. The target system was far beyond anything humans had ever explored. It was past the edge of known space, in a region called the Void. No one had ever been there before. The Galactic Council had warned them not to go. They said it was too dangerous. But humans had always been stubborn. The New Dawn was not like other human ships. It was bigger and faster. The best technology Earth could build. It had shields that could stop most weapons. It had engines that could travel faster than light. It had everything they needed to start a new life among the stars. "Slow us down," Jake ordered. "Let me see what we are dealing with." The ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel. In front of them was a solar system unlike anything they had ever seen. 3 suns burned in the center. Around them, planets moved in perfect circles. But these were not normal planets. They glowed with their own light. "My God," whispered Dr. Alex Turner, the ship's science officer. "Captain, these planets are alive." Jake felt his heart race. Alive planets. This was beyond anything they had expected to find. The planets pulsed with energy. They seemed to breathe. On his screens, he could see massive structures on their surfaces, cities that stretched across entire continents. But they looked empty. "Are there any life signs?" Jake asked. Alex checked her instruments. "No, sir. These planets are alive, but there are no people on them. It is like they are waiting for something." Jake made a decision that would change everything. "Take us closer. I want to see these worlds up close." The New Dawn moved toward the nearest planet. As they got closer, something strange happened. The ship's instruments began to change. The readings made no sense. It was like the laws of physics were different here. "Captain," Lisa said, her voice worried, "our communication system is acting strange. I am getting signals from Earth, but they are coming from the future." Jake frowned. "That is impossible." "Sir, the signals are dated 6 months from now. They are asking where we are, why we have not reported back." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. 6 months in the future. How could they be getting signals from a time that had not happened yet? He looked at his crew. They were all staring at him, waiting for orders. "Send a message to Earth," he said finally. "Tell them we have found something incredible. Tell them we are going dark for radio silence. We will report back in 6 months." Lisa nodded and sent the message. As soon as it was sent, all their instruments went quiet. The strange signals from the future stopped. The ship's computers began to work normally again. But Jake knew something had changed. He could feel it in his bones. This place was not normal. The laws of nature were different here. Time moved strangely. Space bent in ways that should not be possible. "Captain," Alex said quietly, "I think we need to be very careful here. These planets, this whole system, it is not natural. Someone built this place. Someone with power beyond our understanding." Jake nodded. He knew she was right. But he also knew they could not turn back now. They had come too far. The people sleeping in the pods were counting on him to find them a new home. And these planets, strange as they were, might be exactly what they needed. Over the next few weeks, Jake sent teams down to explore the planets, What they found was amazing. The cities were empty, but perfect. The air was clean. The soil was rich. Everything was ready for humans to move in. It was like the planets had been prepared for them, but there were also signs of something else. Ancient machines that hummed with power. Symbols carved into walls that seemed to move when no one was looking. And sometimes, late at night, the crew would hear whispers in the corridors. Voices speaking in languages that had never been heard. Before Jake kept detailed logs of everything they found. He recorded the strange machines, the moving symbols, the whispered voices. He knew that future generations would need to understand what had happened here. As the months passed, Jake began to change. His crew noticed it first. He would stand for hours looking at the strange symbols. He would talk to the empty air as if someone was there, and his eyes began to glow with a faint light. "Captain," Lisa said one day, "are you feeling all right?" Jake smiled at her, but his smile was different now. It was deeper, older. "I am fine, Lisa. Better than fine. I am beginning to understand." "Understand what?" "Why we were called here. Why these planets were waiting for us. We are not just explorers, Lisa. We are the next step." Lisa felt afraid. The captain she had known was changing into something else. Something that scared her, but she also felt excited. Because deep down, she could feel it too. The change was coming for all of them. The 6 months passed quickly. Jake never sent the promised message back to Earth. He was too busy learning. Too busy changing. Too busy becoming something new. The last entry in his log was simple. "We have found our destiny among the stars. Earth will have to wait. We have work to do." After that, silence. The new dawn and everyone on it simply vanished into the void. Back on Earth, people waited for word from their lost expedition. But no word ever came. Years passed, then decades. The Galactic Council declared humans missing and probably dead. Earth built a memorial for the lost colonists. Captain Jake Morrison's name was carved in stone, along with the names of all 50,000 people who had traveled with him into the unknown. But out in the void, something was growing. Something that had once been human, but was becoming much more. The empty planets were no longer empty. They pulsed with new life. And in the darkness between the stars, other ships began to appear. Ships that looked like living things. Ships that moved without engines. Ships that were bigger than anything the galaxy had ever seen. The humans were not dead. They were just learning to be something else. Something that would one day return to surprise everyone who had given up on them. The galaxy had no idea what was coming. Commander Veltash stared at his computer screen and rubbed his 4 eyes. The numbers made no sense. For the 3rd time this week, his deep space sensors were showing something impossible. Massive objects moving through empty space. Objects the size of moons, but there was nothing there. Veltash was a Zephyrian. His people had been watching the stars for 1,000 years. They knew every rock, every piece of space dust, every comet in this part of the galaxy. But these readings were new, and they were getting stronger. "Sir," called his science officer. From across the room, "The gravitational distortions are back. Same pattern as before." Veltash walked over to look at the data. On the screen, he could see waves in space itself. Something huge was bending gravity around it. Something that moved in perfect formation with other invisible objects. "How many this time?" Veltash asked. 17 objects, sir. All moving together. All the same size as small planets. Veltash felt his skin change color with worry. In Zephyrian culture, when your skin turned blue, it meant you were afraid. Right now, Veltash was very blue. "Send the data to the Galactic Council," he ordered. "Let them figure out what this means." But the Galactic Council was just as confused as Veltosh. The strange readings were happening all over the galaxy. Different species were reporting the same thing. Massive gravitational distortions that moved with purpose. Objects that should be visible, but were not there. Dr. Zin Kar was the Council's best scientist. He was a crystalline, which meant his body was made of living crystal that could process information faster than any computer. He studied the reports for weeks, running calculations that would take other species years to complete. I have a theory, Dr. Zinkar announced to the Council. These objects are cloaked, hidden by technology we do not understand. Technology that is centuries ahead of anything we have. The Council members looked at each other with worry. Who could have such advanced technology? All the major species in the galaxy were known. The Zephyrians were the most advanced, but even they could not hide objects this large. Could it be the predecessors? Asked Council Leader Nexvara. She was an old Vector, her crystal body clouded with age and wisdom. Dr. Zenkar's crystal body flashed with uncertainty. The predecessors are legend. No one has ever proven they existed. But if they did exist, Nexvara continued, they would have technology like this. The predecessors were old stories told by every species in the galaxy. Ancient beings who had supposedly seeded the stars with life millions of years ago. Most scientists thought they were just myths. Stories to explain why so many planets had life on them. Captain Ross Mitchell did not believe in old stories. He was a practical man who trusted his instruments more than legends. His ship, the Meridian, was equipped with the newest quantum sensors. If something was out there, he would find it. Ross had been hunting the mysterious objects for 2 months. Every time his sensors detected them, he would race to the location, and every time he would find empty space. It was starting to drive him crazy. Captain, called his pilot, Jenny Walsh. I have a strong reading. Whatever it is big. And it is close. Ross looked at his screens. The readings were stronger than ever before. Something massive was right in front of them. His gravitational sensors said there was an object the size of a small moon directly ahead, but his eyes saw nothing but stars. Take us closer, Ross ordered, slowly. The Meridian crept forward through space. The gravitational readings got stronger and stronger. According to his instruments, they should be hitting a solid object any second. But there was still nothing to see. Sir, said his science officer, Dr. Amy Carter, the quantum sensors are picking up something. Energy patterns unlike anything I have ever seen. It is like reality itself is being bent around something. Ross felt his heart racing. This was it. This was what they had been looking for. Can you get a visual? Dr. Carter worked at her controls, adjusting the quantum sensors to see through whatever was hiding the object. Slowly, an image began to form on the screen. Ross gasped. In front of them was a structure that defied belief. It was the size of a small planet, but it was not made of rock or metal. It looked alive. The surface rippled like water. Strange lights moved across it in patterns that hurt to look at. And it was beautiful in a way that made Ross want to cry. My God, whispered Jenny, what is that thing? Before anyone could answer, alarms started ringing all over the ship. The Meridian was being pulled toward the massive object by some kind of force. Not gravity, something else. Something that grabbed the ship like a giant hand. Engines! Ross shouted, full reverse. Jenny tried everything, but the ship would not respond. They were being drawn closer and closer to the impossible structure. Ross could see details now. The surface was covered with what looked like cities, but the buildings moved and changed shape as he watched. Captain, Dr. Carter said, her voice filled with wonder and fear. The structure is scanning us. I can feel it in my mind. It is trying to communicate. Ross felt it too, a presence in his thoughts. something vast and old and patient. It did not speak in words, but somehow he understood. What it was saying, not welcome. Broadcast a message to the Galactic Council, Ross ordered. Tell them we have found them. Tell them the objects are real, and they are. But before he could finish, the meridian simply vanished. One moment it was there, being pulled toward the impossible structure. The next moment, there was nothing but empty space back on the Zephyrian monitoring station. Commander Veltash watched his screens in shock. The meridian had just disappeared, not destroyed, not damaged, simply gone, as if it had never existed at all. Sir, his science officer said quietly, the gravitational distortions are getting stronger, and there are more of them. I count 47 separate objects now, all moving toward the inner systems. Veltash felt his skin turn an even deeper shade of blue. 47 planet-sized objects, invisible to normal sensors, moving through space with purpose. And now they were heading toward the populated worlds. Sent an emergency message to the Galactic Council. This was beyond anything one monitoring station could handle. This was a threat to the entire galaxy. But across the galaxy, other monitoring stations were sending similar messages. The invisible objects were everywhere, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all moving in perfect formation, all heading toward the core systems where billions of people live their daily lives. Dr. Zien Carr studied the reports with growing alarm. The pattern was clear now. Whatever these objects were, they were not random. They were organized, coordinated, intelligent. We are dealing with a fleet, he announced to the emergency session of the Galactic Council. A fleet of ships, larger than planets. Ships that can hide from our sensors and make our own ships disappear. The council chamber was filled with worried voices. Representatives from dozens of species, all talking at once, all asking the same questions. Who were these beings? What did they want? And why were they revealing themselves now? Could they be human? Asked a quiet voice from the back of the chamber, but the room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at the speaker. It was Dr. Lisa Crawford, the last human working with the Galactic Council. She was old now, her hair gray, her face lined with wrinkles. She had spent her whole life studying alien cultures after her own species had vanished. Humans have been gone for 73 years, Dr. Zenkar said gently. They are listed as extinct. But what if they are not? Dr. Crawford asked. What if they found something out there in the void? Something that changed them? The council members looked at each other with uncertainty. It seemed impossible. Humans had been a young species with simple technology. How could they have become so advanced? But as the reports kept coming in, as more ships disappeared and more invisible objects appeared on their sensors, one thought kept running through everyone's minds. The humans had vanished in the void, and now something was coming. Back from the void, something that commanded planet-sized ships and technology beyond their understanding. Dr. Crawford stood up slowly. She was tired and old, but her eyes still burned with curiosity. If it is them, she said quietly, then we need to ask ourselves a very important question. What did humanity become out there in the darkness? And are they still our friends? As if in answer to her question, every sensor screen in the galaxy suddenly lit up. The invisible objects were no longer hiding. They were everywhere, thousands of them, and they were all moving toward the center of the galaxy where the Galactic Council made its home. Something was coming, something that had once been human, and the galaxy was about to find out what 73 years of evolution in the void could do to a species that had always refused to give up. Admiral Nexvara had commanded the Galactic Defense Force for 30 years. She had fought space pirates, stopped 3 wars, and kept peace between species that had hated each other for centuries. But she had never seen anything like this. Her Flagship, the Eternal Guard, sat in the middle of the largest battle fleet ever assembled. Ships from every member species of the Galactic Council floated in formation around her. Zephyrian cruisers with their glowing hulls. Vector crystal ships that looked like floating diamonds. Even the mysterious Shadowed Ones had sent their dark vessels, but none of it mattered. The enemy fleet was too big. "Status report," Admiral Nexvara commanded, her voice steady despite the fear in her heart. "The gravitational distortions are still approaching," reported her science officer, a young Zephyrian named Koltar. 17 star systems now show massive objects moving in perfect formation. Each object is the size of a small moon. Nexvara looked at the main screen. It showed empty space. But she knew that out there, invisible to her eyes, was a fleet that dwarfed everything the galaxy had ever seen. "How long until they reach us?" she asked. "At current speed, 12 hours, Koltar replied. "But Admiral, they could be here in minutes if they wanted to. These objects are not bound by normal physics." Nexvara nodded grimly. Reports had been coming in for weeks. Ships that tried to intercept the invisible objects simply vanished, not destroyed, not damaged. They just stopped existing. 3 entire battle groups had disappeared without a trace. "Sir," called her communications officer, "we are getting a transmission." "From the Council?" Nexvara asked. "No, sir." "From them." The bridge fell silent. Everyone turned to look at the main screen. Static filled the display, then slowly cleared. What they saw made several crew members gasp. A human face looked back at them. But it was not like any human they had ever seen. The man appeared to be middle-aged, with gray hair and kind eyes. But those eyes held depths that seemed to contain starlight. And behind him, the command center was unlike anything in known space. The walls seemed to breathe. They pulsed with soft light that moved in patterns like living things. Consoles grew from the floor like coral. And the ceiling was not a ceiling at all, but a view of space that showed stars moving in impossible ways. "Greetings, Galactic Council," the man said. His voice was human, but it carried harmonics that made it sound like music. "I am Jake Morrison. Some of you may remember me." Admiral Nexvara felt her blood turn cold. Jake Morrison, the human captain, who had vanished 73 years ago. He looked exactly the same as he had in the old records, not a day older. "That is impossible," whispered Koltar. "He should be dead." Jake smiled, and in that smile was something that made Nexvara's skin crawl. It was too knowing, too deep, too old. "Death is a concept we have moved beyond," Jake said, as if he had heard Koltar's whisper across the vacuum of space. "We have returned to greet old friends and make new ones." "Captain Morrison," Nexvara found her voice, "where have you been? What happened to your expedition?" "We found what we were looking for," Jake replied, "and so much more. We found the truth about the universe. We found the predecessors, and they taught us what we were always meant to become." The camera pulled back to show more of Jake's command center. Other figures moved in the background. They looked human, but changed. Some were partially transparent, with energy flowing under their skin like liquid light. Others seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, their forms shifting and blending with the living walls around them. "The predecessors," Jake continued, "have been waiting for a species worthy of joining them. A species willing to give up the limitations of flesh and metal for something greater. Humanity was chosen. We were tested, and we passed." Admiral Nexvara felt her heart pounding. The predecessors were real. The ancient beings that every species whispered about in their oldest stories, and they had chosen humanity. "What do you want?" she asked. Jake's smile grew wider. "To come home, to share what we have learned, to prepare the galaxy for what is coming. And if we refuse? Why would you refuse a gift? Jake asked. But if you choose to remain as you are, that is your right. We will not force evolution on those who are not ready. The transmission shifted to show the space around Jake's ship. For the first time, Admiral Nexvara could see what they were really dealing with. The human vessels were not ships at all. They were living things. Massive organisms that moved through space like whales through water. About each one was the size of a small planet. Their surfaces were covered with what looked like cities, but the buildings moved and changed shape as she watched. Gardens of alien plants grew in spirals around structures that defied geometry, and lights flowed across their surfaces like neural pathways in a vast brain. "My God," whispered her pilot, Jenny Walsh. "They are not ships. They are creatures." "We are both," Jake said, still somehow hearing everything they said. "We are the fusion of consciousness and matter. We are what happens when a species stops seeing itself as separate from the universe and starts seeing itself as part of it." More human faces appeared on the screen. Admiral Nexvara recognized some of them from the old records. Dr. Alex Turner, the science officer who had vanished with Jake. Lisa Crawford, a xenobiologist who had dedicated her life to understanding alien cultures. They all looked the same as they had 73 years ago, but their eyes held the same impossible depths. "We are still human," Dr. Turner said, her voice carrying the same musical harmonics as Jake's. "We still think and feel and dream, but we are no longer limited by the boundaries of individual existence. We are connected to each other and to the universe in ways that let us do things that must seem impossible to you." "Show them," Jake said quietly. The space around the Galactic Defense Force began to shimmer. Reality itself seemed to bend and twist. And then, without warning, the human fleet became visible. Admiral Nexvara had seen many things in her career, but nothing had prepared her for this. The human fleet stretched as far as her sensors could detect. Thousands of the living ships floated in perfect formation. Some were the size of moons. Others were larger than planets. The biggest ones were so vast they had their own gravity fields, with smaller ships orbiting them like satellites. "There are so many of them," Jenny whispered. 50,000 humans left Earth 73 years ago, Jake said. "We are still 50,000, but we are no longer confined to individual bodies. Each of our ships houses hundreds of consciousness working together. We are a fleet. We are a species. We are a new form of life." The display changed again. Now, it showed the space between the human ships. Admiral Nexvara could see structures floating in the void. Space stations that looked like they had been grown rather than built. Gardens that existed in the vacuum of space without any visible life support. And streams of energy that flowed between the ships like blood through veins. "We have created our own ecosystem," Dr. Turner explained. "Our ships are not just vessels. They are worlds. Each one is home to millions of life forms that we have created or evolved. We are farmers of reality itself." "But why reveal yourselves now?" Admiral Nexvara asked. "Why come back after all these years?" Jake's expression grew serious. "Because something is coming. Something that threatens all life in this galaxy. The predecessors have been holding it back for millions of years, but they are growing weak. Soon, they will not be able to protect us anymore." "What is coming?" Nexvara asked, though she was not sure she wanted to know the answer. "The Devourers," Jake said quietly. "Beings from outside our reality who consume the quantum substrate. That holds the universe together. They turn matter back into void. They erase existence itself." The bridge of the Eternal Guard fell silent. The crew looked at each other with growing horror. Enemies that could erase existence. It was beyond anything they had imagined. "How long do we have?" Nexvara asked. "Perhaps a century," Jake replied. maybe less. The predecessors are calling in every species that has the potential to evolve. Those who can transcend their physical limitations will survive. Those who cannot will cease to exist. And you came back to help us evolve? We came back to offer you a choice, Jake said. Join us willingly, and we will guide you through the process. Your species will continue to exist, but in a new form. Refuse, and we will still protect you as best we can. But when the Devourers come, we cannot promise that will be enough. Admiral Nexvara looked around her bridge. Her crew was staring at her, waiting for her to make a decision that would affect the entire galaxy. How do you choose between evolution and extinction? I need to speak with the Council, she said finally. Jake nodded. Of course, but do not take too long. The Devourers are not patient. And neither are we. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in darkness. Outside, the human fleet waited in perfect silence. Thousands of living ships, filled with the consciousness of a species that had chosen to become something more than human. Admiral Nexvara stood up slowly. She had a choice to make. They all did. Evolution or extinction. It was not much of a choice at all. Set course for the council chambers, she ordered, and send the message to every species in the galaxy. Tell them humanity has returned. And tell them we need to decide what we are going to become. The Eternal Guard turned toward the center of the galaxy, followed by the Lar. The great chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so crowded. Representatives from 47 different species packed the circular room. Some sat in their traditional seats. Others floated in special tanks filled with their home worlds. Atmosphere. A few existed only as energy patterns projected into the chamber dot. In the center of it all stood Jake Morrison. But he was not standing on the floor. He floated 3 feet above the ground, his body shimmering slightly as if he existed, in multiple dimensions at once. Behind him, other evolved humans waited silently. Dr. Alex Turner, her form partially transparent with rivers of starlight flowing beneath her skin. Dr. Lisa Crawford, who had died 60 years ago, but now existed as pure consciousness in a body. Of Living Energy. Council leader Nexvara called for silence. Her crystal body was dark with worry and age. In all her centuries of life, she had never faced a decision like this. Captain Morrison, she began, her voice echoing through the chamber. You claim that humanity has evolved beyond physical existence. You say that ancient beings called the predecessors have chosen your species for transcendence. These are extraordinary claims. Jake nodded slowly. I understand your doubt. What we have become must seem impossible to you. But I can prove everything I say. Then speak, Nexvara commanded. Tell us the truth about what happened to humanity. Jake closed his eyes. For a moment. When he opened them again, they glowed with soft light. It began with the planets we found in the void. They were not empty, as we first thought. They were waiting, prepared by the predecessors for the species they had chosen to evolve. The chamber filled with whispers. The predecessors were legend. To most species, ancient beings who had supposedly seeded the galaxy with life millions of years ago. But no one had ever proven they existed. The predecessors are real, Dr. Turner said, stepping forward. Her voice carried harmonics that seemed to speak directly to the minds of everyone listening. They evolved beyond physical form eons ago. They became one with the fundamental forces of reality itself. But they did not abandon the universe. They have been guiding evolution, waiting for species that could join them. Why humanity? Asked Dr. Zen Carr, the Council's chief scientist. His crystal body flashed with calculation. Why were humans chosen over species with thousands of years more development? Jake smiled sadly. Because evolution is not about technology or age. It is about willingness to sacrifice individual identity for collective growth. Most species become too attached to their physical forms, their separate selves. They cannot make the choice to become something more, and humans could. Dr. Zinkar pressed. Humans have always been willing to sacrifice for the group, Dr. Crawford said, her energy form pulsing with emotion. Your own records show this. Humans died to save strangers. They gave up comfort to explore unknown space. They chose growth over safety again and again. Jake gestured, and the air above his hand began to shimmer. Images formed in the light. The council members gasped as they saw the truth of humanity's transformation. The images showed the human colonists on the living planets. At first, they had been normal humans, building settlements and trying to understand their new homes. But slowly, the planets had begun to change them. The very air they breathed carried microscopic organisms that rewrote their DNA. The food they ate connected their minds to a vast network of consciousness. It was not forced upon us, Jake explained as the images continued. We were given a choice at every step. We could have remained as we were, living normal human lives on the surface of those worlds. But as we learned more about what was possible, most of us chose to evolve. The images showed humans beginning to merge with the technology around them. Their bodies became partially mechanical and partially energy. Their minds linked together, sharing thoughts and memories. Individual humans began to exist as part of a larger collective consciousness while still maintaining their personal identity. We learned to exist in multiple dimensions, Dr. Turner added. Our consciousness expanded beyond the limitations of single bodies. We became part of the quantum substrate that underlies all reality. Representative Culver of the Zephyrian Empire stood up, his scales rippling with disbelief. Even if this is true, why return now? Why reveal yourselves after 73 years? Jake's expression grew dark. Because something is coming that threatens all life in this galaxy. The predecessors had been holding back an ancient enemy for millions of years, but they are growing weak. Soon, they will not be able to protect us anymore. The Devourers, Dr. Crawford said, her energy form flickering with fear. Beings from a reality where entropy rules absolutely. They exist to unmake everything. They consume the quantum foundations of existence itself, turning matter back into void. The chamber erupted in frightened voices. Representatives demanded to know more. How long did they have? How could they fight such enemies? What hope did any of them have? Jake raised his hand, and somehow his gesture brought instant silence. The predecessors had been studying the Devourers for eons. They learned that the only defense is evolution beyond physical existence. Beings that exist purely as consciousness, as patterns in the quantum foam, cannot be destroyed by entropy. You are saying we must all evolve or die? Asked Representative Valanash of the Crystalline Collective. Not all, Jake replied. The choice is individual for each species and each person. Those who evolve will be able to fight the Devourers directly. Those who remain physical will be protected as much as possible. But I cannot promise that will be enough. Dr. Zinkar's crystal body flashed rapidly as he processed this information. How many humans have evolved? All 50,000 who came. With me, Jake answered. But we are no longer 50,000 individuals. We are 50,000 consciousness working as one entity while maintaining our individual creativity and personalities. We are a collective that preserves the self. And your ships? Dr. Zenkar pressed. These living vessels that are larger than planets? Dr. Turner gestured, and new images appeared in the air. They showed the incredible process by which humans had learned to grow their ships rather than build them. Using consciousness to guide matter at the quantum level, they could create living vessels that existed partially outside normal spacetime. Each ship is both a creature and a machine, she explained. They are extensions of our collective consciousness. They can exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, which makes them nearly impossible to destroy by conventional means. And you can share this technology? Representative Nexvara asked. It is not technology, Jake corrected gently. It is evolution. We can guide other species through the process, but each must choose for themselves. The transformation cannot be forced. It only works for those who willingly give up their attachment to individual physical existence. The chamber fell silent as representatives considered this. Give up physical existence to become part of a collective consciousness. It was a terrifying prospect for most species. But the alternative was extinction at the hands of beings that could unmake reality itself. How long do we have to decide? Asked Representative Mordak of the warrior clans. The Devourers move slowly, Dr. Crawford replied. Perhaps a century before they break through the predecessors' defenses. Maybe less if something goes wrong. And if we choose to evolve, Representative Valinash asked, what happens to our cultures? Our individual species identities? Jake's expression softened. You remain who you are, but you become more. I am still Jake Morrison, human explorer from Earth, but I am also part of something larger. My memories, my personality, my hopes and dreams, they are all preserved. But now I share them with 50,000 others, and they share theirs with me. It is like becoming part of a vast library, Dr. Turner added. You are still yourself, but you have access to the knowledge and experience of everyone in the collective. You are individual and universal at the same time. Representative Culver stood again. And if the Zephyrian Empire chooses to remain as we are, then we will protect you as best we can, Jake promised. You are our friends. You welcomed humanity into the galaxy when we were young and foolish. We will not abandon you now. But you cannot guarantee our survival. Culver pressed. Jake's silence was answer enough. Council leader Nexvara stood slowly. Her ancient crystal body creaked with the weight of centuries. This council needs time to consider your offer. Each species must discuss this among themselves. Of course, Jake nodded, but do not take too long. While you debate, we will begin preparing defenses. The human collective will stand between the galaxy and the Devourers, whether you choose to evolve or not. One last question, Dr. Zenkar called out. If the predecessors are so powerful, why do they need our help? Jake's smile was sad, because even gods can die. The predecessors have fought the Devourers for millions of years. They are tired. They are fading. They need fresh consciousness, new perspectives, young energy to continue the fight. They need us to become what they once were, so they can finally rest. The chamber erupted in discussion as representatives began to grasp the full scope of what they faced. Humanity had returned not as conquerors, but as guardians. They offered evolution to those who could accept it, and protection to those who could not. But time was running out. In the dark spaces between galaxies, ANSI, 6 months had passed since humanity revealed itself to the galaxy. The great debate was over. The choice had been made, not by the Galactic Council as a whole, but by each species individually. And the results had surprised everyone. Captain Sarah Walsh floated in the command center of the living ship, New Earth. She had once been a pilot in the Earth Defense Force. Now she was something more. Her consciousness existed in multiple dimensions, connected to the vast network of evolved humanity while still maintaining her individual identity. Status report, she said, though she already knew the answer through the collective consciousness she shared with her crew. 12 species have chosen evolution, reported Dr. Amy Carter, her science officer. Amy's form shimmered between solid matter and pure energy as she spoke. The crystalline collective adapted to the process most easily. Their silicon-based consciousness transitioned to quantum existence with minimal trauma. Sarah nodded. The crystallines had been a pleasant surprise. Their crystal bodies had always processed information differently than biological brains. Converting to pure consciousness had been natural for them. The Zephyrian Empire chose to remain physical, Amy continued, as did the warrior clans, the deep ocean species, and 23 others. They are under our protection now. Sarah felt a mix of sadness and understanding through the collective consciousness. The Zephyrians had been humanity's first friends in the galaxy. Their decision to remain as they were had been respected, but it meant they would always be vulnerable to the coming threat. "Any word from the border systems?" Sarah asked. "Commander Ross Mitchell reports unusual activity near the galactic edge." Amy replied, "Quantum distortions that match the signature of Devourer scouts. They are testing our defenses." Sarah's expression grew serious. Ross had been one of the first humans to volunteer for full evolution. His consciousness now existed primarily in the spaces between dimensions, making him ideal for monitoring threats that existed outside normal reality. "How long before they arrive in force?" Sarah asked. "The collective estimates 18 months, Amy said. Maybe less if they decide to abandon stealth and attack directly." Sarah closed her eyes and reached out through the quantum network that connected all evolved humans. In an instant, she was in contact with Jake Morrison, who had become the primary coordinator of humanity's defense efforts. "Sarah," Jake's consciousness touched hers across vast distances. "I know you are concerned about the timeline." "We all are. Are we ready?" Sarah asked through their mental link. "As ready as we can be," Jake replied. "The evolved species are adapting well to their new forms. The physical species are being moved to protected systems. Our living ships are greeting new defenders every day." Sarah opened her eyes and looked out at the space around New Earth. What she saw still amazed her, even after months of evolution. The human fleet had grown beyond anything the old galaxy could have imagined. Living ships the size of planets floated in perfect formation. Some were covered with cities where evolved consciousness lived in bodies of light and energy. Others were vast gardens that existed in the vacuum of space, growing food and shelter for species that still needed physical sustenance. Between the ships, streams of pure thought flowed like rivers of light. The evolved humans no longer needed to speak or send radio signals. They communicated directly through quantum entanglement, sharing ideas and emotions across infinite distances instantly. "The Zephyrian fleet is requesting escort through the Void sector," Amy reported. "Their merchants are nervous about traveling alone." "Send the Guardian Wing," Sarah ordered. "And make sure they know we consider their safety our highest priority." This was the new reality. The evolved species had become protectors of those who chose to remain physical. It was not a burden, but an honor. Every life saved, every culture preserved, added to the strength of the collective. "Captain Walsh," came a new voice. It was Dr. Lisa Crawford, the xenobiologist who had spent her entire life studying alien cultures. Her consciousness now existed as pure information, but her passion for understanding others had only grown stronger. "Dr. Crawford," Sarah acknowledged. "What can I do for you?" "We have received a communication from the warrior clans," Lisa said. "Their war leader wants to discuss joint defense strategies. They may be physical, but they are not helpless." Sarah smiled. The warrior clans had surprised everyone by choosing to remain in their natural forms. But they had also immediately begun developing new weapons and tactics to fight enemies that existed outside normal spacetime. "Set up a meeting," Sarah said. "All species have something to contribute to our defense." Meanwhile, in the deepest parts of space, Jake Morrison's consciousness existed primarily as a pattern in the quantum foam itself. He was exploring the boundaries of reality, searching for weaknesses in the Devourer defenses. What he found was both encouraging and terrifying. The Devourers were ancient beyond measure. They had consumed countless galaxies over billions of years. They were entropy given consciousness, chaos with purpose. They existed to unmake everything that had ever been created, but they had one weakness. They could only consume what existed in normal spacetime. Consciousness that transcended physical reality was beyond their reach. This was why the predecessors had survived for so long, and why evolution was the only real defense. Jake reached out through the quantum network to contact the oldest surviving predecessor. The being that responded was so ancient that its thoughts moved like glaciers, slow and inexorable. "Young one," the predecessor communicated, "you progress faster than we hoped. How many of your galaxy species have chosen evolution?" 12 have transcended fully, Jake replied. 35 others remain physical but under our protection. It is not as many as we hoped for. It is more than most galaxies achieve. The predecessor assured him, "You have done well, but the final test approaches." "Are your people ready?" Jake considered this. Humanity had evolved beyond their wildest dreams. They commanded fleets of living ships, existed in multiple dimensions, and could manipulate matter at the quantum level. But were they ready to face beings that had destroyed entire galaxies? "We will have to be," Jake answered Dot as if summoned by his thoughts. Alarms began to sound across the quantum network. Every evolved consciousness in the galaxy suddenly felt it. A disturbance in the fabric of reality itself. Something vast and hungry was approaching the galactic edge. Sarah Walsh opened her eyes in the command center of New Earth. Around her, the crew was already responding to the threat. Their evolved forms moved with purpose that transcended physical limitations. "Contact all fleet commanders," Sarah ordered. "It is time." Across the galaxy, the response was immediate. Living ships that had been growing in hidden nurseries suddenly emerged into normal space. Evolved consciousness that had been exploring other dimensions returned to coordinate the defense. Physical species began moving to the protected core systems, where they would be safe. The Devourers had arrived ahead of schedule. But humanity and its allies were ready. In the space between galaxies, something vast and dark began to move. It was not a fleet or an army. It was a force of nature itself. Entropy given form, chaos with intelligence. The Devourers came not to conquer, but to unmake, to return the organized complexity of the galaxy to the simple void from which it had emerged. But for the first time in billions of years, they would face opposition that could match them, consciousness that existed beyond their reach. Evolution that transcended their power. The final battle for the galaxy was about to begin. And at its heart stood humanity, transformed beyond recognition, but still driven by the same stubborn refusal to give up that had brought them to the stars in the first place. Jake Morrison floated in the quantum foam between realities and smiled. 73 years ago, he had led 50,000 humans into the unknown. Now he led billions of consciousness in the greatest fight of their existence. Humanity had returned to the galaxy not as the same species that had left, but as something infinitely more powerful. They had become guardians of reality itself, and they would not let their galaxy fall into the void without a fight. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath as two fundamental forces of the universe prepared to clash. Creation versus entropy. Evolution versus extinction. The future versus the void. In the end, it would come down to a simple question that humanity had been answering for centuries. How far are you willing to go to protect what you love? For the new humanity, the answer was the same as it had always been, as far as it takes.